Hello everyone, Dawn Epting here. Thank you guys so much as always for watching. I wanted to come and talk from the topic, how to overcome anything. How to overcome anything. And hopefully by the end of this video, we will all be inspired to overcome any obstacle and any challenge that we may be currently facing or may eventually face. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to hit the subscribe button underneath this video if you're watching on YouTube, and the bell to receive notifications for future videos. But thank you whatever platform you're watching on and for your comments. So I've written some notes here, and the first thing I wrote is that there's a saying, the root of all suffering is attachment. The root of all suffering is attachment or desire. Have you found that if you've ever been, preoccupied with something happening a certain way, that there's a degree of anxiety, there's a degree of stress that comes with that? So the root of all suffering is attachment. And I also wrote down, resist not evil. That's Matthew 5:39. Resist not evil, because often what we resist persists. Our attention to certain things often cause them to last longer in our lives. And sometimes when we resist things, we get into works. We may try to fix the situation. And sometimes that makes it worse, the situation worse. I heard a teacher some years ago talk about how she had a stain in her carpet. And the more she tried to get it out and brush it out, and put solution on it, the worse it became. And haven't you found that in your own life? There have been some things that you try to fix, and the more and more you try to fix them, the worse they get. So I wrote, our fear and attention to something often attracts what we don't want. Our fear and attention to certain things often attract what we don't want. So I'm going to give a few things, 3 points that I wrote down here, how to overcome anything. And the key, before I get into those points, is not to resist the process. Perhaps you're in a lonely season right now with little to no friendships. Don't resist that process. Don't beat yourself up either for being in that season. And this can work in a lot of different areas. It can work in relationships or in other areas of our lives. But primarily, I would use this in the area of relationships, not to resist the process. And it could even work with financial issues or challenges. It could be applicable rather to something of that nature or business. Sometimes I've heard it likened to looking at a painting. If you were really small and right near the painting, you might see, a few colors, a blob of colors. But when you step back, perhaps it looks like a masterpiece. And sometimes that's how it is in our own lives. We look at one season or one snapshot and we judge it as good, as evil, right, wrong, instead of allowing ourselves to go through that process. And ultimately, there is a greater good that may come from the season that we judged as evil or wrong. So I'll get into the points I've written here. How do we overcome anything or not resist the process? Number 1, accept the worst case scenario in your mind. That will quiet your mind. And I've done this in my own life, but I'll give you an example. There was a well-known pastor, teacher that talked about years ago a man that had been diagnosed with cancer, and he was telling the man about healing or things of that nature. And this is applicable whether you know, are Christian, whatever religion you are, in terms of believing for the best positive outcome. Anyhow, this man happened to be Christian. So he said that this man and his wife were so laden with fear that they didn't even want to consider that this man could die. Now, he was saying that he didn't believe that the man, you know, was going to pass away, but they were so like, no, we have to believe because, you know, it's we can't even fathom him passing away. And the whole point was that, you know, sometimes when there's that much fear, there is another scripture that says the thing that I feared the most has come upon me. Sometimes you have to accept the worst case scenario without fear so that it does not come upon you. I don't know if that makes sense or if I'm articulating this well, but sometimes by accepting it, by saying, okay, what if this did happen? You know, what if in this man's case, what if I did pass away? You know, it would be an extreme, you know, bliss. I would be, you know, in a great place, you know, whatever your belief system is. They happen to be Christian. Or what would happen if I did lose my job? You know, that doesn't, you know, determine my value. I would still be loved. I'm still whole. I'm still complete. You know, and so I did this years ago with a health issue that I was told that I might have, but I didn't. I said, okay, well, what if I did have this issue? I would still be loved. You know, I'm still an eternal, you know, being, spirit with infinite worth and value. So sometimes we equate as human beings what we have determined as bad things to us not having value or worth, or, you know, we feel condemned that we did something wrong. And that is not necessarily the case, you know. So number one, the key here is to accept the worst case scenario in your mind, knowing that you have infinite worth and value. It doesn't determine who you are, and it's not a measurement of who you are. If that scenario did come to pass, and that's accepting it, not saying that you're believing that it will happen to you, but okay, what if that was? What if what I have imagined, quote unquote, or deemed the worst did come to pass? That does not change my worth and value. Again, it's not saying that it will come to pass. It's just allowing your, you know, accepting it briefly, not meditating on it, but accepting that possibility. Because if we know anything in terms of, you know, the spirit realm, if we know anything in terms of, you know, the unseen realm, there are infinite possibilities, you know, and it's just like a radio frequency or radio dial. It's what we tune into, our state of being, where we reside all the time, that manifest in our lives. But briefly thinking of what you have determined is the worst case scenario does not mean that you're tuning into it. And that does not mean that that's your desire. It doesn't mean that that's what you're ultimately going to tune into. And it does not mean that that will manifest in your life. It's just not resisting it, not having that fear. And because, like I said earlier, what we fear, what we resist, what we give attention to often has a way of manifesting into our life. So it's, okay, what if that did happen? Briefly looking at that possibility without fear. So that's number one, accepting the worst case scenario in our mind, knowing that we have, without fear, knowing that we have infinite worth and value. Accepting the worst case possibility, I like to say, in our mind, knowing that we have infinite worth and value, and doing that without fear. Number two, Know that you alone are enough. You don't need the job that you fear losing. You don't need the relationship you fear losing. You don't need the friendship that you fear losing. You are more. You're an eternal spirit with infinite worth and value. Life is not about things. The true you is an eternal spiritual being, like I said, with infinite worth and value. So even if you did lose the relationship, even if the possibility did manifest that you lost the friendship or the job, that's not who you really are. You are not defined by those things. Your value was given to you long before you were ever formed on this earth or came into this earth. And it does not cease to exist because people leave or things are lost. It doesn't even cease to exist when you transition out of this physical body. So know that you alone are enough. That's how to not resist the process. Know that whatever comes in those infinite possibilities that take place in your mind, especially those worst case scenarios, you alone are enough. And finally, visualize and feel what you desire and rest in it being done. Visualize it, see it in your mind's eye. What you can perceive, you can achieve. Because like I said, all things exist, all things are now. So visualize it, feel it, tap into that frequency, like I said, like a radio station. Tap into that. Make a habit of residing in that feeling, in that state. Because if you can visualize it, that means that it is a possibility, it exists, and it can manifest in your life. So when in step one, you're accepting the worst case scenario in your mind without fear, or in step one, when you're accepting the worst case possibility in your mind without fear, knowing that you have infinite worth and value, that doesn't mean that that's going to come to pass. You still go on and you visualize and feel what you truly desire. It's just in step one, you're saying, I don't fear that. If that was to happen, if that possibility was to happen, it doesn't determine who I am. So hopefully this video has been helpful. Feel free to look below the video to see how you can get involved with some of the things that are going on here. Thank you guys so much. Feel free to share your stories of how you applied this or how you're applying this now. You know, how you're not resisting a process, or how when you calmed your mind and, you know, faced things that were happening in your life without fear, knowing that it didn't determine your worth and value, how things and the situation changed around to manifest the things that you wanted. So thank you guys so much. I look forward to seeing you soon, and have a great one. Bye-bye.